Welcome to the world of Sci-Fi Stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe the channel. Enjoy the listening. An alien princess seeks a human mate for her 16-year-old daughter. The stars had always been a mystery to humanity, a realm far beyond their reach, filled with lights and wonders that seemed to mock their limited existence. Yet in the vast expanse of space, Earth had never expected to be at the center of an intergalactic proposal. When the message arrived, it wasn't in the form of a signal, a beacon, or a broadcast from a distant planet. It was delivered to Earth's leaders, sealed within an enigmatic craft appearing over the United Nations headquarters in New York City. The vessel hovered for hours, its silent presence enough to rattle every nerve on the planet. It was sleek, shimmering in hues of violet and silver, a beautiful sight, yet every eye that looked upon it felt a chill down their spine. It was the kind of craft humanity had only seen in the most advanced science fiction movies. Then the transmission came. A hologram appeared before the world's leaders, a towering figure composed of shimmering light and soft alien symbols. The image morphed into a regal figure, a woman tall and graceful with lavender skin, her silk and silver hair floating about her head like a living crown. The air buzzed as the alien spoke in a voice that had a strange cadence, but it was universally understood through a translator system. Embedded in the projection, "I am Princess Lura of the Killer Empire," she began, her eyes glowing with intensity, "and I seek the perfect partner for my daughter, a man from your world, one worthy of becoming her protector, her companion, her king. This is no simple request. It is a matter of galactic importance, for my daughter is not only a royal heir, but the key to an ancient power that could alter the fate of the universe." The room fell silent. A mix of disbelief and confusion rippled across the faces of the Earth's leaders. A royal heir, a cosmic power. This could not be real. That the princess continued, her eyes scanning the room with an unsettling authority. "We have studied your species for centuries. Your planet Earth is rich in both history and potential. Your human spirit, your resilience, your innovation, your courage has captured our attention. We have chosen your world because of these qualities. My daughter, Princess AA, is young, 16 cycles old by your standards, but she is destined for greatness, and we require a man who can rise to this challenge." A murmur ran through the assembly. 16, someone whispered, incredulous at the thought. "Yes," the princess answered, her voice steady though it carried a weight of unspoken history. 16, though she is young by your measure, she has already proven herself in ways beyond your understanding. Her future is tied to the fate of many worlds, and it is imperative that she be bound to a protector from Earth. The message was clear. A man, an Earthman, was needed to marry AA, the alien princess. Not for love, not for an alliance of mutual benefits, but because the fate of the universe was at stake. And it wasn't just any man they were looking for. They needed someone who could handle the magnitude of what the princess represented. The transmission flickered and crackled, shifting to a new image. A younger woman appeared beside the princess. She was beautiful, with eyes that shimmered like stars and long flowing hair of a pale gold hue. The alien princess smiled softly as she gestured to the girl beside her. "This is Aura, my daughter. She is strong, intelligent, and capable, but she needs a protector who will challenge her, someone who will stand beside her as an equal. Earth, we come to you because you are the last hope for her future." The room grew tense. The implications of the princess's words hung heavily in the air. Earth was not being asked, it was being chosen, and the stakes were incomprehensible. The nations of Earth had always dreamed of exploring the stars, of interacting with alien life, but now they were being told that their destiny was linked to the future of the universe itself. As the hologram flickered off, the sound of hushed voices filled the room. The representatives exchanged confused looks. Some were fearful of the consequences of such an arrangement, while others were captivated by the grandeur of the proposition. Meanwhile, across the room, Michael Spencer, a scientist and the unofficial leader of the United Nations Special Alien Task Force, stepped forward. His mind raced. This was no ordinary diplomatic mission, no simple negotiation. The princess had just offered them an opportunity of unimaginable power and responsibility, but there was a catch, a terrifying one. A 16-year-old girl, an alien princess, was to be bonded to a man. From Earth, a protector, a partner. But what did that mean? What kind of power would this girl have? Why was she the key to the fate of the universe? And what kind of relationship would Earth have to forge with an alien empire so vast and ancient? Dare Spencer looked around at his colleagues, his expression grim. There were many questions left unanswered, and yet no one knew where to begin. Across the world, as the message replayed on screens in every country, people reacted differently. Some were hopeful, some were horrified, but all were in agreement. They were facing an intergalactic challenge of epic proportions. In the quiet of a dimly lit room, President Richard Cross sat in front of a screen replaying the holographic message. His mind, trained in diplomacy and international relations, had seen many bizarre situations, but none like this. The weight of the decision ahead was staggering. A simple marriage could change the course of history forever. For better or for worse, he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, his fingers steepled in thought. Then one thought lingered in his mind. Who would answer the call? The news spread like wildfire across every continent. The proposition from Princess Lura of the Killer Empire was met with a mixture of awe, skepticism, and fear. But the idea of an Earthman being chosen to marry an alien princess was too grand for anyone to ignore. It captivated the imagination of billions. Within hours, the media was flooded with speculation. Talk shows, news outlets, and social media platforms buzzed with questions. Who would be chosen? What kind of man would they need to be? Was this truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface of the princess's request? In the quiet of his office, Dr. Michael Spencer sat hunched over his eyes, scanning the files that had just been delivered to him. They were profiles, but not of any ordinary man. These were the kinds of men the Cathar Empire had identified as potential candidates. The profiles were detailed, filled with data that seemed almost too personal. In intelligence scores, physical measurements, psychological evaluations. These men had been vetted by the aliens themselves, chosen for their strength, intelligence, and resolve. Yet Dagger Spencer was troubled by one thing. The names were eerily familiar. He wasn't the only one who felt that way. Across the world, nations began their own search for the ideal candidate, but as more and more profiles were handed out, there were whispers that this was no random selection. There was a pattern, a strange sort of inevitability to the names that appeared on those lists. The first name that caught Dagger Spencer's eye was Nathan Blackwell, the decorated Navy officer with a reputation for bravery and quick thinking. Under pressure, his file was thorough, perhaps too thorough. Blackwell had always been a man of few words, but his actions spoke louder than any speech. He had served in combat zones, often on the front lines, and had faced danger without hesitation. His leadership skills were unparalleled, and his ability to adapt in any situation was why the Killer Empire had apparently marked him for this mission. His file included an unsettling remark: strong but emotionally distant, capable of forming connections under intense pressure. But it wasn't just Blackwell's profile that stood out. There were others, men from different corners of the world, all with exceptional abilities and strengths, yet none of them seemed to have the complete package. Blackwell, on paper, was the ideal candidate, but something gnawed at Dagger Spencer. Why were these men specifically chosen? Was it true their abilities that made them perfect for the task, or was it something else? Meanwhile, the United Nations began making their own preparations for the meeting with Princess Lura. In the days following the transmission, Earth's government scrambled to find a way to handle the princess's request. Behind closed doors, discussions were tense, with many leaders hesitant to engage with an alien empire that seemed so powerful yet so mysterious. Others argued that humanity had been given a unique opportunity to join the stars. No one was sure how to proceed. No one knew the full scope of what they were facing. But there was one thing that everyone agreed on: one man from Earth would have to go to the car Empire. One man would have to step forward, accept the challenge, and face the unknown. As the day of the selection drew nearer, the tension in the air was palpable. The world waited with bated breath. Reports flooded in, each one detailing the candidates' personal lives, their families, their strengths and weaknesses. But no matter how much the media tried to sensationalize the event, there was one question no one had the answer to. Why had Princess Lura chosen this man in a small nondescript house on the outskirts of a military base in the United States. Nathan Blackwell stood in front of a mirror, his jaw clenched. He had just received the call. He had been selected. He was the one. He didn't know how to feel. There was no guidebook for this kind of situation. The Killer Empire had specifically asked for him. It didn't matter that he had never met Princess AA or that the very idea of marrying an alien princess was beyond his comprehension. The facts were clear. He had been chosen as a child. Nathan had dreamt of space, of what lay beyond the atmosphere, but he had never imagined being part of a galaxy-spanning drama like this. The weight of the decision settled heavily on him, but there was a part of him that felt something else, a sense of duty. He had faced war, death, and betrayal in his career, but never had he been asked to face the fate of the universe. The phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Dare Spencer. "We need you to come to the United Nations immediately. The princess wants to meet with you." Nathan didn't hesitate. He knew what this meant. He was going to be part of something that would change the course of human history forever. Meanwhile, in a grand palace on the alien world of Kar, Princess Ala stood in front of a vast window that overlooked her home planet. The sight of the swirling clouds, the shimmering oceans, and the far-off mountains should have been beautiful, but to her it was a reminder of her burden. She was the heir to a mighty empire, but she was also a pawn in a game much larger than herself. Her mother, Princess Lura, had always told her that one day she would marry a human, a man who would stand beside her, a protector of sorts. But AA wasn't sure what that really meant. What kind of man could understand the complexities of the power that she wielded, the weight of the empire on her shoulders? As she looked out at the stars, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. It was her mother standing in the doorway, her regal presence filling the room. "HEK coming, AA." Princess Lura said softly. "He will be here soon." Turned, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Will he be what we need? Will he be strong enough?" Princess Lurk's expression softened. "Only time will tell, my daughter. But I have faith. Earth's greatest strength lies in its unpredictability. This man, this human, he will be tested, and you, AA, will test him." AA nodded, though doubt lingered in her heart. She had always been trained for leadership, for the mantle she was destined to wear. But this was different. And she wasn't sure if she was ready. Back on Earth, as Nathan Blackwell prepared to board a shuttle that would take him across the stars, he had no idea what awaited him. He knew only that the future of the universe, his universe, was in his hands. Nathan Blackwell had traveled across the world, fought in the harshest environments known to man, and faced danger head-on. Yet nothing prepared him for what lay ahead. He sat aboard the transport shuttle, staring at the small shimmering window outside. The stars stretched into infinity. He could feel the hum of the engines beneath his feet, a steady pulse that carried him further away from Earth. With each passing moment, his hands gripped the armrests, knuckles white as his mind swirled with questions. Why had he been chosen? Was there truly something special about him? Or had it all been part of some strange cosmic calculation? Was he simply a pawn in a larger game? Just another piece in an intergalactic chess match? He had no answers, only the cold certainty that he was bound for a place where no human had ever set foot, and he would be meeting someone who had never known the limits of humanity. The journey was long, but Nathan's military training had prepared him for such extended missions. He was in top physical shape, though it felt different now. The stakes were higher. He was not just heading to a remote location for a mission. He was heading to another world, to meet a princess, a royal figure who carried the fate of galaxies in her hands. His shuttle passed through a shimmering portal, the point of no return. The landscape outside began to morph. What had been a sea of stars transformed into a vast expanse of purple clouds and glittering star systems. His body pressed into the seat as the ship entered the atmosphere of Kavar, the home world of Princess AA. The moment the shuttle touched down, the hum of the engine ceased, and the doors opened with a soft hiss. Nathan stood, his legs feeling slightly unsteady, as if gravity here was subtly different. He wasn't sure what to expect, but this was nothing like Earth. He stepped out of the shuttle, blinking in the bright alien light. Kar's twin suns hung low in the sky, casting an eerie, almost dreamlike glow over the landscape. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flora, and the sound of a distant breeze whispered through the trees, carrying an otherworldly melody. The city before him was built from smooth silver-gray stone, towering spires stretching into the sky almost as if the architecture itself was alive. The air was alive with the hum of alien energy, and the technology around him was both foreign and beautiful, sleek, efficient, and he thought far beyond anything humanity had yet achieved. As he stepped forward, a group of alien soldiers in ornate armor lined the path, their eyes glowing softly as they observed his every movement. Their presence was imposing, yet their silence conveyed a sense of awe, as if they too were waiting for something monumental to unfold. But Nathan's attention was quickly drawn to the woman who stood ahead, framed by the entrance of a grand palace. Her presence radiated authority and elegance. Princess Lura, with her regal bearing and lavender skin, greeted him with a nod. Her eyes were as sharp as they were calculating, filled with an ancient wisdom that Nathan couldn't fully understand. "You have arrived, Earthman," Princess Lura said, her voice smooth yet commanding. "Welcome to Cathar." Nathan nodded, taking in his surroundings. "Thank you for bringing me here, but I have to ask, why me?" Princess Lurk's smile was enigmatic. "We have chosen you because you possess something rare: strength, intelligence, and a deep connection to the heart of your species. These qualities are invaluable to my daughter AA. She is destined for greatness, but she cannot walk that path alone." Nathan felt a chill at her words, though he didn't show it. My daughter Lura had said he wasn't just going to be a diplomat or a partner. He was stepping into a role that no Earthman had ever occupied before. The idea of marrying an alien princess, of being the one to stand beside her as she wielded unimaginable power, was still surreal to him. "I understand," he said, though part of him wasn't sure if he did. "Where is she?" Princess Lurk's smile faltered, and for a moment a shadow passed over her face. "Come, I will take you to her." The palace was an architectural marvel. The walls seemed to shimmer with an ethereal light, and every room was filled with holographic projections, strange alien artifacts, and intricate organic designs that blended seamlessly with the technology. As they walked through the corridors, Nathan couldn't help but marvel at the beauty and strangeness of it all. Every detail seemed designed for something greater, a civilization that had long ago transcended what humans could even imagine. At last, they reached a grand chamber, a room that seemed to be made entirely of glass. The floor was smooth, reflective, and the ceiling was open to the sky, where the twin suns bathed the room in an otherworldly light. And there she stood, Princess AA. She was as beautiful as the stories had promised, yet there was something far more powerful about her than mere physical appearance. Her eyes shimmered like liquid stars, and her long golden hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of light. She was tall, regal, and her presence commanded the room. But it wasn't just her physical beauty that struck Nathan, it was the aura around her, a quiet intensity, as though she was not only aware of her royal status, but also of the immense power that lay within her. She regarded him with curiosity, her gaze piercing and unreadable. There was no warmth in her eyes, no indication that she was glad to meet him. She was measuring him, assessing him, as if she was waiting for him to prove himself worthy of being in her presence. Nathan straightened, feeling an odd mixture of awe and intimidation. He had seen many powerful figures in his life, but none like her. Princess AA, he said, his voice steady despite the swirl of emotions inside him. "It's an honor to meet you." She tilted her head slightly, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. "Is it?" Nathan felt a brief flash of confusion, but didn't let it show. This wasn't the warm welcome he had expected. But then again, how could he expect anything else? He wasn't here to court her or make her feel at ease. He was here for a far greater purpose. "I'm not sure why I was chosen," Nathan said, his voice taking on a note of honesty, "but I'm here now. Whatever the task is, I'll do what's necessary." Ela studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "You may think you understand what's required of you, but until you stand by my side and face the challenges that await us, you We'll never truly know. Nathan's jaw tightened, and for the first time he realized just how different things would be. He was not simply being asked to marry an alien princess, he was being asked to share in a responsibility far greater than anything Earth had ever dealt with. You'll need to be more than just a protector, Earthman, she continued, her voice soft but unyielding. You'll need to be my equal. Are you ready for that? Nathan took a deep breath. I don't know what that means yet, but I'll find out. AA didn't smile, but there was something almost imperceptible in her eyes, a flicker of something, hope perhaps, or understanding. She stepped closer to him, and her voice dropped to a near whisper. Then prove it. The days following Nathan's arrival on Killer were filled with uncertainty, and yet an undeniable sense of purpose began to take root in him. He had come to this alien world with little understanding of the forces at play, but now he was beginning to grasp that his mission was far more complex than he had imagined. The Princess AA had made it clear that his role was not simply that of a consort or protector. It was something deeper, something that transcended both personal duty and political alliance. From the moment he met AA, he had known that his path would not be easy. The princess, though magnificent in her beauty and poise, had an icy detachment about her. She observed him from a distance, measuring him, testing his resolve. She didn't seem to want to make it easy for him to prove his worth, and Nathan understood that she was not just any princess. She was heir to an empire that spanned galaxies, and the fate of civilizations rested on her shoulders. His first few days in the palace were spent in isolation. Princess Lura had instructed that Nathan undergo a series of trials tests, designed not only to assess his physical capabilities, but also his mental and emotional strength. The Killer people, after all, believed that a true protector must be capable of enduring hardship in all forms. There could be no weakness, no hesitation. The stakes were far too high. The first trial was simple yet brutal. He was placed in a large circular arena within the palace grounds, a sprawling open-air structure surrounded by stone walls that rose up like a fortress. At first, Nathan thought it was just a physical test. He stood at the center of the arena, ready to face whatever was thrown at him. What he hadn't expected, however, was the sudden appearance of creatures, massive towering beasts that seemed to materialize out of thin air. They were not purely organic, but a hybrid of technology and biology. Their bodies were covered in thick armored plating, and their eyes glowed with a strange, unsettling light. The creatures hissed and growled, encircling him with predatory intent. The first attack came. Without warning, one of the beasts lunged at him with frightening speed, its massive claws aiming for his throat. Nathan barely had time to react. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the swipe, and scrambled to his feet, his instincts kicked in, honed by years of military training. He grabbed a nearby weapon, a staff that hummed with energy, and swung it at the creature. The staff connected with its armored hide, sending a shock wave through the creature's body. But it didn't fall. Instead, it roared in anger and lunged at him again. The battle was grueling. Nathan had no choice but to fight with everything he had, using every tactic at his disposal to outmaneuver the creatures. The arena was vast, and the beasts were relentless. They seemed to have no end, emerging from the shadows, each one stronger and more vicious than the last. Nathan's muscles burned and sweat streamed down his face, but he pushed on, refusing to give in. For what felt like hours he fought. His body was battered and bruised, and his mind was beginning to falter from exhaustion. Just when he thought he couldn't go any longer, there was a sudden shift. The beasts stopped their attacks, stepping back and surrounding him. In that moment of stillness, Nathan realized that the trial wasn't about defeating the creatures, it was about endurance. They were testing his ability to survive against overwhelming odds. Panting heavily, Nathan dropped to his knees, his body trembling, but he had done it. He had survived. The second trial was even more insidious. Instead of brute force, it tested Nathan's emotional resilience. He was led into a small, dimly lit room, and before him appeared a holographic projection. The image was of his parents, long since passed away. They were smiling, younger, healthier, as they had been in his fondest memories. "Isn't this what you want?" The projection of his mother asked, her voice soft and familiar. "To return home, to be with us again. Your duty on Killer is nothing. Come back. Let us take care of you." Nathan's heart skipped a beat. The temptation was overwhelming, the thought of seeing his family again, a feeling that love and warmth was something he had long since mourned. He stepped forward, reaching for the holographic figures, but something within him held back. His mission, his purpose, was not here in this room. It was far greater than that. A voice echoed in the room, Princess Oz voice, calm and cold. "Your feelings are a weakness. Emotions are fleeing. You must control them if you are to stand by my side." Nathan clenched his fists, the hologram flickering before him, his mother's face, twisted, becoming distorted and hollow. "Stay with us, Nathan," the projection urged, now colder and more manipulative. "Leave this world behind. You don't belong here. You never did." The image flickered again, and Nathan's heart nearly broke at the sight of his family torn apart by the illusion, but he forced himself to breathe, pushing past the grief, focusing on the reality before him. His family was gone. They would always be with him in memory, but they couldn't come back. He had a new purpose now, a new responsibility. With a heavy heart, Nathan turned his back on the projections. The moment he did, the room vanished, and he was standing once again in the grand hall of the palace. The final trial was the most difficult of all. Princess Lura had made it clear that Nathan's test would not be complete until he proved his ability to connect with AA, to understand the complexity of the role he was meant to play. He had to understand her, not as a princess, not as a ruler, but as a person. AA had always kept her distance, speaking to him only when necessary, in observing him with a critical eye. She was aloof, her emotions tightly controlled. But Nathan had seen glimpses of something more beneath her cold exterior, something fragile, something buried deep within her. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the palace grounds, Nathan approached her in the quiet solitude of a balcony. The wind was soft, carrying the scent of the alien world's flowers. He stood there for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. Before speaking, "Ela," he said softly, "I don't understand everything about your world. I don't know what it's like to carry the weight of an empire. But I want to understand. I want to be more than just a protector. I want to be someone you can rely on, someone who stands by you, not just in battle, but in everything." For a moment, AA said nothing, staring out into the distance. The silence stretched on, but Nathan didn't break it. "You waited." Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what it's like to be me, to be trapped between duty and desire, between what's expected of you and what you truly want." She turned to face him, then her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "I didn't ask for this, Nathan, but now it's my reality, and it's your reality too." Nathan stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Then let's face it together. I may not know everything about your world, but I know that we can face it together. I don't need you to be perfect, AA. I just need you to be you." For the first time, a flicker of something warm crossed Oz's face, a hint of vulnerability. She didn't speak, but in that moment something shifted. The trials were over, but their journey was just beginning. The bond between Nathan Blackwell and Princess AA grew stronger in the days that followed. Despite the cold, unyielding nature of Kar's royal court and the pressure that weighed on both of them, they began to understand each other. Nathan had passed the trials set before him. He had proven himself both physically and emotionally resilient, but nothing could prepare him for the revelation that awaited them. The delicate peace between the killer empire and the galaxy's neighboring systems was beginning to unravel. Whispers of rebellion began to circulate, and unrest spread like wildfire. For the first time, Nathan realized that he wasn't simply here to marry Princess AA or act as her consort. He had been chosen because of the fragile peace that was teetering on the edge of collapse. He was being pulled into something far greater than he could have ever imagined. One night, AA and Nathan stood on a balcony overlooking the grand city of Cathar. The sky stretched overhead like an endless ocean of stars, the twin moons casting their silvery light upon the palace. The wind carried the scent of the alien flowers in the garden, but despite the tranquility of the scene, an undeniable tension hung in the air. "Nathan," said, his voice low, "what's happening? I know something is wrong. The killer empire can't be this stable if everything is as it seems." AA turned to him, her expression guarded, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. There are forces at play that even I can't control, she said. Her voice tight. Rebellion is brewing on the fringes of our empire, the outer colonies. Those who were once loyal to my family are now questioning our rule. The killer people are fracturing. There are whispers of a coup. Nathan's heart raced. He had heard rumors of unrest in the empire's outer reaches, but he hadn't expected them to hit this close to home. So what happens now? How do we stop this? Thera's eyes darkened. We can't simply stop it. The rebellion has already begun. My mother's reign is being challenged by the most dangerous faction to rise in decades, the Orcs clan. They are led by a man named Valter, a ruthless leader who believes the killer empire has grown too soft. He believes that only through force can we unite the galaxy. Nathan felt a shiver run down his spine. He had heard of Valter, the warlord who had once fought in the great wars that had ravaged the galaxy, a man with no mercy, no compassion, who had been exiled after the conflict ended. If Valter had returned to challenge the Empire, things were about to get far worse than anyone had imagined. If Valter is as dangerous as you say, Nathan began, then we need to act fast. We can't just sit here and wait for him to make his move. You need to prepare your people. Rally your forces. Shook her head. It's not that simple. Valter has allies, many of whom are high-ranking officials within my court. The killer empire is riddled with corruption. No one is truly loyal to the crown anymore. Even my own mother is not. Invincible. Nathan frowned. Then we'll have to fight in a different way. We can't rely on armies alone, not when we don't know who we can trust. Took a deep breath. I know that's why you're here. You were chosen not just for your strength, but for your ability to see through the political games. You're a soldier, Nathan. You're used to strategy, to seeing the bigger picture. Nathan's mind raced as he processed her words. He had been thrust into a conflict he hadn't fully understood, but now he was beginning to see the enormity of what was at stake. It wasn't just a war for the killer empire. This was a war for the future of the entire galaxy. Over the next few days, Nathan and began to plan. The first step was to uncover the identities of those loyal to Valter, to root out the conspirators within the palace walls. It was no easy task. The killer court was a labyrinth of deceit and betrayal, and no one could be trusted. But Nathan's experience in military intelligence had prepared him for this kind of operation. He knew how to sift through the lies and uncover the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried. As they worked, became more open with Nathan. She confided in him about her fears about the weight of her destiny and the immense pressure she felt to uphold the legacy of her ancestors. She spoke of the expectations placed on her as the heir to the killer empire, of the burden of leadership that was slowly suffocating her. I was never meant for this, she admitted one evening, her voice trembling. I was always a child, a symbol of hope. But now I have to lead an empire into war, and I'm not sure I'm strong enough. Nathan looked at her, his expression softening. You don't have to do it alone. We'll face this together. I've seen what you're capable of. Valid. You're stronger than you think. For the first time since he had arrived, allowed herself a small, genuine smile. The barriers between them were beginning to crumble, and in their place something deeper was beginning to grow. It wasn't just duty that bound them now. It was trust, understanding, and something else entirely, something neither of them could yet put into words. But as the days passed, the unrest continued to grow. Reports came in from the outer colonies, and every one of them spoke of escalating violence, of revolts that were growing bolder by the day. The Orcs clan was making its move. Valter had begun his march on the capital. The time for subtlety was over. One morning, summoned Nathan to the royal war room. The chamber was filled with maps of the galaxy, each one marked with the locations of the rebel movements. The air was thick with tension, and Nathan could sense the urgency in the room. Valter is not waiting any longer, said her voice resolute. He's marching on the capital. His forces are vast, and they're well equipped. We don't have the luxury of time. Nathan studied the map, his mind working through their options. He could see the pattern of the rebellion, the way Valter was systematically cutting off supply lines and isolating key planets in the Empire. If they didn't act soon, the killer capital itself would fall. We need to strike before he gets too close to the heart of the Empire, Nathan said, his voice steady. "We can't wait for the entire Killer fleet to mobilize. We need to hit Valter's forces where they're weakest." Ara nodded. "I agree. We have a small but loyal fleet. It's not much, but it's enough to make a difference. But we'll need to take Valter by surprise. His forces are massive, and they're used to overwhelming their enemies." Nathan's eyes narrowed as he looked over the map again. He knew what needed to be done. They would need to divide Walter's forces, confuse them, and strike quickly. There would be no time for hesitation. It was a risky plan, but it was their only chance. "We'll hit him in the heart of his fleet, disrupt his command, and divide his forces," Nathan said. "Once we've done that, we can begin rallying the Killer loyalists and take back the capital." Ara met his gaze, and if we fail, Nathan's expression was hard, his resolve unwavering. "We won't fail." But even as he spoke those words, the reality of the situation began to sink in. If they lost, it wouldn't just be the end of A's reign. It would be the end of everything they had fought for the weeks that followed. Nathan and A's decision were filled with preparations. The Killer Empire was teetering on the edge of collapse, and every move they made now would either preserve the fragile thread of peace or condemn them to the chaos of total war. Nathan had never felt the weight of responsibility quite like this. Before, this was more than a mission. It was the fate of an entire galaxy hanging in the balance. The plan was set into motion quickly. With the loyal fleet of killer ships prepared to engage, Nathan took charge of a small elite strike team that would launch a covert assault on the heart of Valter's fleet. They needed to his command, confusion, and hopefully break the back of the rebellion before it could fully take root. But as the strike force prepared for their mission, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The Killer fleet, despite being outnumbered, had a distinct advantage in terms of technological superiority. Their ships were faster, sleeker, and more advanced in weaponry. Still, Nathan knew that technology alone wouldn't win this war. It would take cunning, precision, and perhaps even a bit of luck. He could see it in A's eyes. The same fire that had fueled her through the trials now burned with an intensity he hadn't seen before. She was no longer just the fragile princess from the stories. She was a warrior, a leader willing to sacrifice everything for the survival of her people. On the night before their mission, Nathan and Arva stood together on the balcony once more, the stars twinkling like cold fireflies in the vastness of space. The weight of the impending battle hung between them, unspoken but understood. Nathan said, his voice soft yet determined. "Tomorrow, we fight for everything we've ever known, for your empire, for your people, and for a future where we don't have to fear war every single day." A's gaze softened, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. "I've never wanted this, Nathan, to be a ruler, to make these choices. But I understand now. The future is not just about what I want, it's about what we're willing to sacrifice." Nathan, Ed stepping closer to her, "We'll do it together every step of the way. And no matter what happens, we won't back down." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their words settling over them like the heavy burden of destiny. The stars above felt colder than usual, as though they too were watching the fate of the universe unfold. The next day, the fleet of killer ships assembled in the war room. Nathan and AA had a final strategy meeting before they watch. AA, as the commanding leader, was a vision of result. Olv, as she issued orders, her calm, authoritative presence was a far cry from the uncertain princess who had first met Nathan. "We strike at dawn," she declared, her voice steady. "Our best chance to break Valter's command structure lies in attacking his flagship, the Blood Reaper. If we destroy his communications and control center, we can disable his fleet and cause confusion long enough to shift the momentum in our favor." Nathan nodded. His strike team, along with the fleet's best pilots and engineers, would infiltrate the Blood Reaper, planting explosives in key locations to the ship. Then they would escape before the rebels even knew what hit them. It was a risky plan, one that could end in disaster if they weren't careful. As the fleet slipped into position, Nathan and his team were briefed one last time. The tension was palpable. Each member of the team knew the risks. They were walking into the heart of enemy territory, and their chances of survival were slim. Still, there was no turning back. If they failed, the consequences would be dire. They would either die in space or be captured by Valter's forces, but failure was not an option. The mission began just as the first rays of the twin suns began to cast their pale light over the galaxy. The killer fleet moved swiftly undetected as they approached Valter's forces. Nathan's strike team, cloaked in the shadows of the larger fleet, launched from the palace ship and began their descent toward the Blood Reaper. Once we're aboard, Nathan said into his comms, his voice calm but sharp. We go straight for the control center, no detour, no distractions. If we're lucky, we'll have a few minutes before they realize we're. Inside the massive hull of the Blood Reaper loomed before them, a dark behemoth of metal and firepower. Its surface gleamed in the light of the distant stars, an imposing fortress in the vastness of space. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the ship, his eyes scanning the expanse. They had to land without alerting the enemy, without triggering the ship's automated defenses. As they docked inside a cargo bay, the air was thick with tension. The team silently filed out their footsteps, muted by the artificial gravity of the ship. They moved like shadows, communicating through hand signals and the occasional whisper. The hallway stretched out before them eerily silent. This was a ship built for war, and yet it felt as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to ignite. The powder keg within, they moved swiftly, planting explosives at key locations. As they went, ensuring that the control center would be disabled in a matter of minutes. But as they reached the heart of the ship, something went wrong. The door to the control room opened, and a squad of rebel soldiers poured in, guns raised. "Get down!" Nathan shouted, pushing one of his team members to the floor as blaster fire erupted in the narrow corridor. The team immediately retaliated, their weapons blazing as they engaged the rebels in close-quarter combat. Nathan dove into the fray, his training taking over as he dispatched the first wave of attackers. The heat of the battle was intense, the sound of blaster fire ringing in his ears as his strike team fought tooth and nail to protect their mission. Status report, Nathan shouted over the comms as he dodged another round of fire. "We're in, but we've been compromised," one of the engineers responded. "The explosives are set, but we've triggered a lockdown. We won't be able to get out through the main hangar, damn it," Nathan muttered under his breath, his mind racing. "Then we'll have to take the long way out. We've got the explosives set, but we've been compromised. We'll need extraction." Is he? The comms crackled with Oz's voice. "Understood. Hold tight, Nathan. We're coming for you." The fight continued to rage, and despite the overwhelming odds, Nathan's team managed to hold their ground. But as they planted the final charges on the ship's core systems, the clock was ticking. Their escape route had been blocked, and they were running out of time. "Move!" Nathan barked. "We blowing the core in 3 minutes. Let's get out of here." With the rebels closing in and the charges primed, Nathan and his team dashed through the hallways of the Blood Reaper, hoping to make it back to their escape pods before the inevitable explosion. The tension was unbearable as they made their way through the darkened corridors, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the ship's metal skeleton. They had no time to lose, and failure now meant certain death. As they neared the docking bay, Nathan felt a shift in the air, a low hum as the ship's self-destruct mechanism activated. The countdown had begun. "Everyone move now," he shouted. They sprinted toward the escape pods, the explosion of the Blood Reaper looming closer. With a last look at the chaos they had left behind, Nathan and his team boarded the escape pods, launching them into the cold void of space. The killer fleet moved in, ready to finish the fight. The battle for the fate of the Empire had only just begun. The explosion was cataclysmic. The Blood Reaper, Valter's flagship, disintegrated into a massive ball of fire and debris, sending shockwaves through the surrounding space. Nathan Blackwell and his team had barely escaped before the entire ship became a smoldering wreck. The blast illuminated the cold darkness of space like a supernova, the light reflecting off the killer fleet as they pressed their advantage. Nathan's escape pod shot through the debris, propelled by the sheer force of the explosion, and came to a sudden halt as it docked with the nearest killer vessel. His pulse was racing, and his breathing was heavy. As the hatch opened, he and his team were greeted by the sight of Ilara's flagship, the Regal Dawn, which had swiftly moved into position after the explosion. Nathan said over his comms, his voice tinged with exhaustion, but triumphant. "The mission is complete. We've disabled Walter's command, "The Blood Reaper is gone," a voice crackled through his earpiece, and Oz's words were filled with relief. "You did it, Nathan. You've done what we couldn't. The Blood Reaper is gone, and Walter is without a central command. We've thrown a wrench into his operations. Now it's time to finish what we started." Nathan nodded grimly. Even though he couldn't see her, the rest of his fleet is still out there. We've got a long fight ahead. The tension in the air was palpable. The killer fleet had dealt a major blow to the rebellion, but Walter was no fool. He would not go down without a fight. Reports flooded in from Killer Command. Walter's forces, now fractured, were regrouping on multiple fronts, but the rebellion was far from defeated. The Empire was still on the precipice of civil war, and no one knew if they had the strength to push through. Back in the war room, the killer fleet's top commanders were gathered, poring over strategy maps and communications. Nathan, covered in sweat and grime from the battle, entered the room with AA, who had taken her place as a commanding leader. Despite the beauty and grace of her royal attire, there was no mistaking the steel in her eyes. The princess was now a queen in the making. "We've dealt Walter a crippling blow," AA began addressing the room, "but we must strike before he has a chance to regroup. He will not give up easily." One of the senior commanders stepped forward, his brow furrowed in concern. "The question now, Your Highness, is how to deal with the remnants of Water Fleet. They've been scattered across several systems. If we pursue them head-on, we risk splitting our forces and leaving ourselves vulnerable to a counterattack." Nathan, who had been standing at the edge of the room, stepped forward. He had been listening closely, his mind already formulating a plan. "What if we don't fight them all at once? What if we hit them where they least expected, divide their forces even more, and then finish them off in smaller engagements?" Delira's eyes locked with his, a spark of recognition in her gaze. "Go on, Nathan." He gestured to the map spread out before them, highlighting key points in the galaxy. "We know Walter's fleet is fractured, but the Killer Empire has intelligence on the locations of his remaining strongholds. We can use that to our advantage. We don't need to chase down every fleet. We focus on his most loyal followers, the ones who have the most resources. We strike fast, hit their supply lines, their reinforcements, and then force them to break apart. Once Walter loses his strongest ships, the rest will crumble." The commanders looked at each other, their faces a mixture of uncertainty and hope. AA stood tall, her decision clear in her eyes. "We'll follow Nathan's plan. It's risky, but it's the only way to ensure a victory. And I will lead the charge," she said with determination. Her words resonated through the room, and the fleet's commanders saluted her. AA was no longer the sheltered princess. She had become a symbol of strength, a beacon for her people. The rebellion may have been trying to tear apart her empire, but AA was ready to fight for her kingdom, her people, and the future of the galaxy. Hours later, Nathan and AA stood together on the bridge of the Regal Dawn, watching as the fleet prepared for the final push. The atmosphere was electric, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. "You've come a long way, AA," Nathan said quietly, glancing at the woman beside him. "You're not the same person I met back on Earth." Ela smiled, a faint warmth in her gaze. "I never was the same person, Nathan. I was just too afraid to admit it. You've helped me find my strength, just as I've helped you find yours. This battle, it's not just mine anymore, it's ours." Nathan gave her a small nod, though a hint of concern remained in his eyes. "We still have a lot of enemies to face, Alla. The hard part is yet to come. Walter is dangerous. He won't go down easily, I know," she replied, her voice firm. "But we've already taken his greatest asset from him. We've exposed his weakness, and now we finish what we started." The fleet moved into position, the countdown to battle echoing through the ship. The atmosphere on the bridge shifted from anticipation to focus, every crew member working in synchronized precision. Nathan could feel the weight of the moment. This would be their final stand, the climax of everything they had fought for. It was no longer about protecting a single princess or even saving the Killer Empire. This was a fight for the future of the galaxy. The battle was swift but brutal. The killer fleet engaged the scattered remnants of Walter's forces, and a series of fast, coordinated strikes, as Nathan had predicted, by isolating the most powerful factions and targeting their reinforcements, they were able to dismantle Walter's fleet one piece at a time. The rebel forces, disorganized and increasingly outmatched, struggled to mount a coherent defense, But Walter was not a man to be underestimated. As R's flagship came under fire, the rebels launched a counterattack with devastating precision. The battle was far from won, and Nathan knew that the war would come down to one final confrontation. The capture of Walter himself, the Regal Dawn, locked its sights on Walter's last stronghold, a fortress hidden in a remote corner of the galaxy. As the fleet's fighters and capital ships engaged in combat, Nathan and Allah's forces prepared to board the fortress and bring the fight to Walter's door. As they stormed the fortress, Nathan and AA led their forces into the heart of Walter's last stand. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and the crackle of weapons fire. They'd fought their way through the fortress's defenses, encountering wave after wave of rebels, determined to defend their leader. Finally, they reached the heart of the fortress, where Walter awaited them. Standing tall and imposing in his battle armor, his face hard as stone, his eyes glinted with malice as he faced AA, the woman he had sought to overthrow. "This is the end," Walter. Lara declared, her voice unwavering. "Your rebellion ends here." Walter chuckled darkly, his voice a low growl. "You think you've won, princess? Your empire is weak, it always has been. And you," he sneered, pointing at Nathan, "you're nothing more than a pawn in her game." Nathan's hand tightened around his blaster. "You're wrong, Walter. The galaxy isn't yours to conquer. We've already won." With those words, they launched themselves into battle. The final confrontation was fierce, but in the end, it was AA who struck the killing blow. Walter crumpled to the ground, his body broken. The rebellion was over. As the dust settled, AA stood over the fallen leader, her breath ragged, her heart heavy with the weight of the battle. Nathan joined her, his eyes meeting hers with